Welcome everybody. Good evening. Very welcome to this session about our memory, the mysteries or the secrets of our memory with Boris Nikolai Konrad. I just had dinner with him and I forgot my coat. It was in the wardrobe and I was outside and I thought, oh, I forgot something. So that's already a good start of the evening about memory. I usually prepare my talk written down, but I'm going to do it by memory. I think I should do it because Boris Konrad is able to memorize 52 cards from play cards in a very short time. So I should be able to memorize something about our speaker of this evening. Boris Nikolai Konrad, he is a researcher at the Donders Institute at the Nijmegen University, and that's a center for cognitive neuroimaging. And his research focuses on memory, what happens in your brain when you try to remember something. So he puts people in a scanner and gives them all kinds of tasks. He has been in a scanner himself for lots of time because he has a super memory. Boris is also 4 times a Guinness Book of Record holder. I'm not sure if anybody holds a Guinness Book of Record, but that's very special. 4 times in also memory competitions. He did a lot of TV programs, Wet and Das, that's in Germany, and also had to memorize a lot of things. Besides that, he is a professional memory trainer. He gives a lot of trainings and talks, which he's going to do this evening. And he is author, that's also very important to mention. De geheimen van ons geheugen, over herinneren en vergeten en het trainen van een superbrein. So translated to English, the secrets of our memory, about memorization, forgetting and the training of a super brain. So it's a very nice book. Boris has a lot of books with him, so after the talk he will sell some of them. I think that was about it. I think this is a good introduction. I'm not sure if I forgot something, but you don't know what's on my list, so I want a big hand for Boris Nikolai Konrad. Thank you.
So, who of you has a really good memory? By show of hands? Okay, 2.5. Okay, that's a decent start. And I admit after this introduction, maybe it's not the moment you enthusiastically raise your hand up. I also find it quite interesting that more or less wherever I come, most people would rather say, well, good, it's okay. And quite some people find their own memories bad. It seems to be getting worse and worse. More and more people have their partners' names tattooed on their bodies. Yeah, but maybe that's something different. It can also go wrong, you can see that here. Therefore, I am a fan of at least occasionally using your own brain and your own memory. But of course it's true, if I want to impress people with my memory, remembering my wife's name will not be sufficient, right? I find it quite interesting always to see how well known my sport, memory sports, actually is. Because there are definitely parts in the world where it's more known than here, in particular in Asia. The World Memory Championships are an annual event. They are also national, in some countries regional events, but there's 1 time a year the World Championships in memory sports. And 6 years ago, this event took place in London, in England. And a country named Mongolia, with just 2 million people, for the first time ever had a whole team competing. And they immediately achieved rank number 3 in the nations table, like in the medal table. And for Mongolia, this was such a big success. When the memory sports team from Mongolia flew back home, in Mongolia at the airport, they were welcomed by the Mongolian Prime Minister in person. The head of the team, as memory athlete, was the official athlete of the year of Mongolia, and actually a judge at MGT, like Mongolia's Got Talent, right? Something like this. The Philippines got second. When they flew home, they were welcomed at the airport by national television for the evening news. They were later invited to the National Congress, and the best of them have full-time scholarships to be professional memory athletes. My team, Germany, I don't know if you can hear that I'm German. Yeah, okay, you can. My team, Germany, we won. Yes. And that is title defending team. I was picked up at the airport by my mom. A local news brought such a long article, but misspelled my name. Yeah. So that's the difference. I don't want to complain too much. As you said, I find it quite nice, at least the media sometimes invites me to show what memory is. And besides German media, I also was on Wedden dat ik het kan on the Dutch TV, and also Holland's Got Talent and Doctors van Morgen, Tijd for Max, and so on. So they give me the chance to show what it actually is all about, at least sometimes. And of course, I thought before I tell you a little more about the science and let you train your memory, I have to do a brief demonstration. Can you shuffle cards? Can you shuffle cards? Can someone shuffle cards? Can you shuffle the cards for me, please? A memory competition is typically a decathlon, which means, like in track and field, we have 10 different disciplines, ranging from names and faces to words to numbers. And always the 10th and final event is to memorize the order of one shuffled deck of playing cards. So 52 playing cards are shuffled. I have to memorize the order of all of them as quickly as I can. How long do you think that I will need? A couple of minutes, I hear. You shuffled them a bit?
52 seconds.
Well, if I could do 10 seconds, I would be in Monte Carlo in the casino right now. Okay, so that's 10 seconds won't be possible. Maybe someone can time me. Can someone take the time for me? Someone with either a watch or a smartphone will have the opportunity over there. When you're ready, can you please give me like a ready, get set, go? And then I'll see how fast I can do it today.
Yeah, ready? Go.
Okay, stop. How long was it?
1:15.
1 minute 15. Okay. Now we have to see if it works. If it worked. I'll need one more person to help me. Can you also help me, please? Could you assist me with this? Yeah, if it's fine for you. I'll give you the cards. Please don't drop them. No, that would be. I'll put the camera image up there. The camera is in here. So if you stand here, please. And I'll try to name the cards top to bottom. So the top card first. After I named it, please on about this distance show it to the camera. And then just put it to the side. Put this away. We don't need this. So let's see. It should begin with 8 of spades. 8 of spades. Okay, awesome. A little higher, even higher if you
That's
like.
good.
Awesome. And then you can just put it to the side. And then it's 5 of clubs.
Yes.
And 5 of clubs. And we have ace of spades. Yeah. King of diamonds.
Yes.
And then 10 of diamonds. And it's 9 of spades.
Yes.
It's 3 of hearts.
Yes.
It's king of clubs. It's ace of diamonds.
Right.
It's 2 of diamonds. It's 7 of hearts. It's I'm Mr. Is it 5 of spades?
2.
2 of clubs.
I don't mind.
Okay. Next, thanks. Next one is 8 of diamonds. And then it's now it's 5 of spades, and then it's king of spades, and then it's 5 of hearts. Then it's 4 of clubs, 9 of hearts, 9 of clubs.
Right.
It's queen of hearts,
Yes.
jack of hearts,
Yes.
3 of clubs,
Right.
8 of clubs.
Right. You're fast.
Doesn't mean now if I'm too fast. It's then 6 of diamonds,
Right.
jack of clubs,
Right.
6 of spades,
Right.
ace of clubs,
Right.
2 of hearts,
Right.
king of hearts,
Right.
3 of spades,
Yes.
9 of diamonds,
Right.
10 of hearts,
Right.
jack of spades,
Right.
4 of spades,
Right.
7 of clubs,
Very good.
6 of hearts,
Right.
Queen of diamonds,
Right.
5 of diamonds,
Yes.
6 of clubs,
Yes.
Ace of hearts,
Yes.
4 of diamonds,
Yes.
3 of diamonds,
Right.
8 of hearts,
Very good.
7 of diamonds,
Right.
Queen of spades,
Right.
10 of spades,
Very good.
7 of spades,
Right.
4 of hearts,
Yes.
10 of clubs, 2 of spades, Jack of diamonds.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks. Just leave it there. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, 1 or 2 cards. I hope that's okay. A minute 15. Yeah, that's good too. Actually, my best in the competition once was 30 seconds to memorize deck of cards. It works a little bit different because you get the second deck of cards and you have to bring it in the same order. So if you have a few gaps, you see which cards you're missing, which of course is way easier than just naming it. When I get to perform something like this, I often hear the question, Boris, please tell us, when did you realize that you can do this? So apparently people assume that I just can do it. No, I show off a little. So sometimes I say, well, back when I still studied physics, that radioactive spider bit me. Since then I can do that. But of course it's nonsense because I never realized that I can do this. But I learned how to do it. And yes, of course, I trained it a lot. And indeed, if you go to such a memory competition, as I mentioned, you can ask every single competitor. You will always get the same answer. I could not do it, then I learned to do it, and then I trained to get faster. This, by the way, is not an updated slide because it still says World Memory Champion. Actually, 2 days ago, the World Championships of this year took place in China, and it's now an Italian guy. So he was the World Champion until 2 days ago. Alex Mullen, a medical student from the US. Here you see him memorizing not 1 pack of cards, but we also have a marathon where he memorized 36 decks within 1 hour. 36 decks in an hour. So it's not just about a little amount of information very fast, it can also be tons of information. I never could do 36 in an hour, but I once managed 20 decks in an hour, which I was quite pleased with, until he did 36. It's quite fun to see where memory sports came from. Actually, I find it fun. The first World Championships in memory sports took place in 1990, and they already called it the World Championship, despite it has been 7 British men who met in London. But still, they called it the World Championships, so that was the start, and it really grew. In particular in Asia nowadays, it's pretty popular, and if you like in China or Mongolia want to be on the national team, you really have to qualify from city level to regional, to state, to national, and then national team. This was another recent bigger competition, and yeah, it still looks maybe sometimes a little bit boring because everyone just memorizes it on paper. How it looks also depends, of course, how you want it to look. If you want it to look just like a typical sport, you just have big trophies, and that's nice. If you want it to look nerdy, you just give everyone a white T-shirt. If you want to be American, you just have great glasses. It depends on what you want to have it look like. As I said, what's true is that all of these people will tell you, well, it's something I learned. And it doesn't matter if they're Chinese, Mongolian, American, or wherever they are from. What's true is also that we didn't know that much why it works. Like, when I did it, it was true I studied physics and computer science, and when I was doing my master's thesis, I realized I was by now way more interested actually in memory and brain research than my master topic. And like the cover question is, why do we get our brain from nature, but not the manual? Why can you learn to use your brain differently and suddenly you can remember more? And because there wasn't much that could help me answer this question, I was happy I got the chance to do my PhD on the brains of memory athletes. And first in Munich at the Max Planck Institute, where I studied the brains of memory athletes. No worries, they're all doing fine. It works a little different than shown here. But talking about the brain, did everybody bring one? Oh, I hope for the best. Could you please join me in forming 2 fists like this? And hold them next to each other, maybe in front of your chest, just like this, and look down. What you see now is very simple, very simplified, but nice model of your brain. So the size, the volume is about good. That's about the size, the volume of your brain. You look a bit disappointed. But it's about good. So what does it tell us? Of course, first, the room we have up here, of course, we use quite well. Learning does not imply that the brain needs to grow. Actually, the highest number of neurons in your brain you have when you're about 3 years old. And then it all goes down. Well, which is good, because it means you get more efficient. But apparently learning doesn't mean that you need to grow neurons specifically. If you fold your hands, this stands for the piece of information that learning actually happens in the connections you lay. That if you make new connections, that means learning. And this is a quite important finding. So I don't want to go too deep in all of the sciences. At the end, we had 28 memory athletes involved in the study, and we only had those who performed really well on the memory competitions. They were not all just students. Average age was around 30, with the range from 19 to 58. A little less than half were female, and they also performed pretty high on IQ tests, like intelligence tests. But this might be because we only enrolled those who also performed really well within these competitions. And we first checked, for example, can they really memorize this, even when they are not in a competition, but in a lab, and yes, they can. So it's not just a magician's trick. No, they can really memorize this information. If you look at playing cards, the difference to normal people is astonishing. And if you take a more real-life example, like names and faces, the difference is not that big, but still like massive effect sizes. Then you kind of do a little more interesting tests. We used one that's well known in psychology, which is called directed forgetting. It works like this. You get a word on a computer screen, like I think this says tower, right? If you could read it, it should say a word. It should say tower. I think the color's a little bit off. And then afterwards, you get a command to either remember it or to forget it. Then you repeat that with 100 words, 2 seconds per word. And then you tell the people, please write down all the remember items. Then you tell them, well, could you also try to write down the words we asked you to forget? And then memory athletes get really angry, like really angry. Like, if you told me, I could have memorized them. And so, yeah, I know, but could you please try at least? And they do. We are good reason to believe they do. But if you first look at the remember items, well, again, astonishing effect. Memory athletes are nearly perfect in this task, way, way, way better than controls. But what do we find in the forget items? Well, they're not. So it's not naturally that their memory is enhanced, that they just remember everything. They will say, well, if you ask, did you suppress a memory maybe? They say, no, I didn't. I just did not use my method. So for remember items, I used my method, but if it said forgot, I did not use my method. So it does not seem to be anything about suppression. We also gave them a working memory task. Working memory is kind of what holds information for a couple of moments in your brain. And we don't find a difference here either. So some people seem to assume this is just short-term memory or working memory. It's rather the opposite. Like these playing cards, I will still definitely know at the end of the lecture. And I will still know them by tomorrow. It's not gone within minutes. I will not know them a year from now. Besides, if I want to, if I had a reason to, but I'll come back to that in a moment. Of course, we also looked into the brains of the people, and this is how our scientific paper then looks like. And if you just look at the structure of the brains, for example, there was one earlier paper, but we confirmed it with ours. We don't find any difference. So you do not need to have a special brain to be able to do this. Then we look into the so-called connectivity. We defined a number of networks in the brain we knew should be relevant for these processes: memorization, localization, visualization, and saw how connections in the brain changed here. And then we do find quite some differences, which are marked here. Mostly in red, which means they're stronger in the memory athletes, but some even in blue, where memory athletes had less than the control group. But I don't want to go into too much detail of this, because the question is, of course, well, apparently this works, but how? How do people then change the connections in their brain? And well, most memory athletes, despite me being one, are not neuroscientists, so they probably don't even know anything about this. They will just know, well, I use memory techniques. So I guess it has something to do with these. And I like to summarize my memory techniques in this image. It's my memory palace. A term that got popular in the last years, memory palace, which I like to adapt here. And in the roof, I have the word memory. And the memory is what I like to support. So I have different memory techniques. The roof is supported by different columns. But all those columns are based on a joint basement. So there's a joint principle used to enhance your memory, which here says visual thinking. If you think in images, if you picture something in your head, if you use your inner eye, however you like to call it, more parts of your brain get active than if you don't, which leads to more connections and a better memory. That's the theory. Do you believe me already? Well, let's just try it out. So, thanks for nodding, but I think seeing it for yourself might convince you a bit further. Because I memorized something, so now it's your turn, okay? I want to show you some pictures. I will show you 20 pictures, one at a time, like one after each other, and I'll show them to you fast. Like really fast, like extremely fast, better don't blink, okay? So, are you ready? Your task is just try to remember as many of the pictures as possible. I hope that was clear. It was a bit fast, so just one more time. You will see pictures one at a time, and you should just try to, like memorize them, remember them. Okay, ready, get set, go. Okay. These were 20 pictures. How many can you remember? Most people typically have like what was at the beginning and at the end. So it's called as primacy and recency effect. That's very common that you know the beginning and the end better than all the blur in the middle. Does anybody believe he or she knows more than half, more than 10? No one? Oh, maybe one or two. Okay. I have a different claim. I claim that all of you remember all or nearly all of these pictures. You cannot freely recall them now, which is of course an important distinction. But I guess you will be able to recognize them. What I will do is I will show you 2 pictures at a time. One you did see earlier, the other you did not. Then once that everyone joins in, please shout left or right. Which one did you see? So which one did you see before? Say left or right. And also point with your finger, please, okay? Also point with your finger left or right. Which one did you see before? I don't memorize if you make a mistake, okay? So I promise. I do memorize if you don't join in, okay? So just to make that clear. Okay, which one do you know?
Left.
Well done. So, it worked pretty well, right? So, why did I let you point at these? That doesn't have any effect. It's just more funny for me to watch. So that's also important. But I could have gone further. If I had way more time, and I felt not to prepare for my class, I could have shown you more pictures. There was already in the 1970s a range of studies published by an American psychologist with a great name to publish called Lionel Standing. And he did this first with 20 and then way more. The longest version he published, he had people look at 10,000 pictures. 10,000. A bit slower than this, 3 seconds per picture, which meant that the volunteers came Monday to Friday, 5 hours per day to watch our pictures. And then the next Monday they came back, so like a week afterwards, so the next Monday, and 100, not all 10,000, but 100 randomly selected were shown like this way with the pictures they did not see before, and people had to say, which one did you know? And on average, they had 89% good, like 9 out of 10 good. Which shows that our brain is really, really good in encoding pictures if we just saw them once, even if it's brief. It's true if I do this with words, you will also be better than guessing. But in the longer versions, people with words were at like 63 to 67%. So better than guessing, but way worse than with images. And the fun thing is that you can make use of this. And I want to show you one method in particular, which is called in scientific terms the method of loci. I mentioned the term before, also it's known as the memory palace. Who has heard of the method of loci before as a memory technique? 1, 2, about 5 people. And the memory palace, 2 or 3 more. Like the term memory palace in the last years got a bit popular by the BBC Sherlock series, where Sherlock goes to the memory palace. You're nodding, yeah. He's cute, huh? Yeah. So that's something people know. And there was also a book by an American journalist, which in Dutch was released at Het Geheugenpaleis, so the memory palace in Dutch. This is just a different term for the same pretty ancient memory technique. It goes back way before me, it goes back to the ancient Greek rhetoricians. And the theory is you should visualize a number of locations. And then you picture these locations in your head, and you put images on these locations. And later you can go back in your mind, you will find the images back, and you know what you wanted to remember. Again, that's a theory. Let's try it out. Let's do a little warm-up exercise. I would like you to picture you're standing outside your home, wherever you live, your house, your apartment, your room. You're standing outside, and you open the front door and look inside. What do you see? Can you picture your place? Well, I know, of course, if I open my front door, there's like the clothes hanger, and then there's the guest bathroom with the toilet and the washing basin. And then I go into the living room, passing the open fire pit, underneath the staircase, into the west wing. Well, something remotely similar, at least. What do I want to show you? Of course, you can all picture how your place looks like, but you never spend any specific mental effort to memorize it. I don't know how often you come here. It's my first time being here. But still, of course, I know when I came in that there was like a bulletin board with some comedy posters, and on the right side there's the toilets, and then there were some standing tables, and then also seating, and then it goes in here. So without any effort, this is just something our brain is really good at remembering. And normally doesn't make any use of when you try to learn something that's hard. Names and faces, stuff from study books, complex material. But you can. And I would like to show you how. Just to confirm this, in our study, like 100% of all memory athletes said, yes, I use this technique a lot, and basically all 100% said it's the main reason I can do what I can do, this specific mnemonic technique. If I have a group which is a bit smaller than today, for a bit longer, like if I give a one-day workshop, which I do also by now offer in Dutch, German, and English, I will have 10 to 20 people, and we literally walk around like the seminar hotel or wherever we are. So we're too big to do that, so I brought an alternative set of locations, which is not in a room, but along the human body. And I call it the body list. Didn't look really carefully at your seats. Do you have enough room to stand up for this? It would be helpful. Like if you could stand up for me, if it's possible. If it's too crowded, then don't. But if you like, you could stand up for me for this one. I'd like you to remember the following 10 locations along the human body. I have to start somewhere, so I start at the bottom. You can join me if you like. The feet are number one. The feet are number one. And now I just work my way up from the bottom to the top. So just see what I see next. And next is the knees. So you can do a little squat if you like. The knees are number 2. And then I have the upper leg, the thigh, upper leg, thigh. That's number 3. Then I have my backside, my bottom. That's number 4. Number 4. Could you please raise your hand? Raise your hand, please. Your hand has 5 fingers. So put your hand on your belly, please. On your own belly. Number 5 is the belly. If I'm not at 5 at the belly, I forgot the location. So 1 were the feet, 2 is the knees, 3 is the thigh, 4 is the backside, 5 is the belly. 6 is my chest, or your chest. 7 the shoulders, 8 throat, 9 mouth, 10 are the eyes. 5 was the belly, 6 is chest, 7 shoulders, 8 is throat, 9 mouth, 10 are the eyes. Can you let me hear it one more time, please? Number 1 are? Feet. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well done, you can have a seat. I like to claim, well done, good job, but well, if I'm honest, it's actually not that difficult. So, why is it easy? Because you know how the body looks like. It already were 10 locations, which is more than you can typically hold in working memory, where people can on average have like 6 or 7 pieces of information. So that's already quite a bit. But the order made sense. I still could have chosen mouth and nose. You would have remembered. I picked mouth and eyes, and you know it. The amazing thing is not that you know the list, but that you can use it as a tool for really good memory performance. If I now showed you 20 random words, 20 totally random words, and you had to memorize them without gaps, in correct order, Who would be confident he or she could do it? No one. Okay, let's see if we manage to do it together. So how do we do it? Of course, using the body list. So you already know 20 words, 10 locations. It's 2 words per location, which is no universal law. It's just working well for this example. In practice, it can be more or less, but we take 2 words per location. One thing is really important, because sometimes I notice if I occasionally have students who read in an article in a student's magazine about this technique that they believe while they learn, they have to come up with locations. This is not true. The locations must be prepared. You already have the locations, even though you have no clue what you're going to do with it. That's really important. It's the same thing for me. When I study something, when I memorize these cards, before I even look at the first card, I know where I will go. So we start with the feet. And the first 2 words are moss and cow. So I picture maybe I put my shoes away, and I really try to see it in my head. Like, I see it, but even if I stress visual thinking, I include all my senses. So I see, I put my shoes away and walk over moss, but I also feel it. So it's nice and squeezy, but also a little cold outside. So with my feet, I'm walking over moss. And while I'm walking around this moss, I suddenly see a cow standing there chewing on the moss. So you can picture this, and that's all we need. And from all the walking, I get a little tired, so maybe I'm lucky there's a tree stump or something. I'll sit down, I have rest. And the moment I sit down, I see from the side, here comes the Queen of England. And she's going to sit on my lap, but she's quite noble, so just in front, on the knees. That's totally crazy. Yes, you're right. But you can picture it. And before I realize it, I maybe offer the Queen the seat. The Queen takes a bell and makes a lot of noise with a bell. We remember Queen and bell. Try to make it specific. Maybe is it a cow bell, like from the cow earlier? Is it maybe a church bell? Is it Sinterklaas bell? It doesn't matter, but choose one. Try to really hear it. So the Queen is sitting on your knees, on your own knees. You see the Queen sitting like a small girl and then playing with a bell. Totally crazy, which means you absolutely will remember it. So that's good. Next location is the size, the upper leg. And try to feel that your leg is getting really warm, really hot. Like it's really burning hot, and you wonder what the heck is happening. You put your hand into your pocket, and you see there's a light bulb in your pocket, a light bulb. And this light bulb is on. Clearly, it's on. That's why it was getting so warm, so hot. But you wonder, like, how? There's no socket, there's no electricity, but it's really hot. It's on, clearly. And while you still look at it, you see suddenly a bull coming towards you, a bull, and the bull eats the light bulb. So it's the upper leg, I have a light bulb, and the bull who eats it. At the backside, maybe you picture your own backside. Maybe you can hardly see it in the mirror, but maybe on the side, on your backside, you see there's a freshly made tattoo. Oh, not again. But it's getting worse. You don't just see any tattoo. On your own belly, you see a beautiful tattoo of Peter Pan eating a hamburger. You should tell me, well, Peter Pan, I heard that name before, but I don't have a good picture. Maybe you picture someone called Peter, if you know anyone, on your backside eating a hamburger. Okay, so if you got that, we're good. Next location, where was number 5? Belly. So number 5 is a belly. Then maybe you hear a little sound, you wonder, well, I had good dinner, why is it rumbling? No, it's not your belly making the noise. In front of you stands a bear, maybe a strong grizzly bear. And that one is hungry, so he takes his hand, his paw, he tries to hit you, but you can step back, so only scratches you a little. It remains a red line, the scratch, red line on your belly. For a bear, leaving a line on your belly. Let's review the first 5. So at the feet, we were walking over moss, there was a cow chewing on it. And on the knees sits the Queen with the bell. The leg was so warm because there's a bulb, the bull, the tattoo of Peter, burger, and the bear, lion. Okay, so you see all these awkward images work really well, so let's just go on like this. So next location is the chest, and maybe you look down on your chest. If you look down on your chest and you see like a very, very tiny horse running around your chest, and someone is madly riding it. For mad and rider, you see this mini horse running around your chest, like maybe a toy one, but it's really moving, and some mini rider sitting on there, and he's really mad riding around your chest. And then someone ticks you on the shoulder. Maybe you feel someone ticking you on your shoulder and you're turning your head to the side, you're wondering who's actually sitting next to me tonight. And you're surprised because it's the Pope. Well, it's a fantastic Studium Generale, so awesome he also joined us. But he was still hungry, so he's eating some pizza. He's having some pizza in his mouth. So you feel your shoulder being ticked, and next to you sits the Pope with some pizza. Next location is the throat, and maybe you feel a bit tickling because someone tickles you with a key. Someone took a key or some keys and tickles your throat with some keys. So it's a bit metallic, a bit cold, a bit tickly, and you wonder who's tickling you with the keys. And it's a chef. The chef of a lovely restaurant who wants to maybe raise your appetite so you buy more of his food. So key and chef. Next one is easy again. Location, mouse. Words, laugh, and Eiffel Tower. Well, if I should come up with a picture for laugh, it's a mouse, of course I would think of a kiss. Where could it be more romantic than at maybe on top of the Eiffel Tower? I close my eyes, I enjoy the moment, I forget everything around me, and don't even realize that one of the many pickpockets steals my wallet. So lovely. When I open my eyes, the tense location with the eyes, I see immediately a book flying towards me, a book. And of course I get really angry, I shout, get this person arrested. She threw this book at me, that's absolutely not okay. I want her to be arrested, she threw this book at me. So I open my eyes, I see a book flying towards me and shout, arrest her. Fifth location was the belly, there was a bear and a lion. And then there was the chest, I was a mad rider, and I really feel the feet of this mini horse. And someone ticks me on the shoulder, it's a Pope, pizza. Or it's tickling, it's a key, chef. And mouse, it was laugh, Eiffel Tower. I open the eyes, I see the book flying towards me. I should arrest her. Okay. That were 20 words, as promised. What do you need to do to remember these? Well, you go back to your list. So we start at the feet. And if you remember, just shout it back. I just want to hear the 2 words, not the whole story I made up, just the 2 words per location. Do you remember the 2 words at the feet? Awesome. At the knees? In the pocket there was a light. And ball eats it. So tattoo of? At the belly it's a... On the chest I see the... Mad rider. Awesome. Who tips me on the shoulder? Fantastic. What do I feel? And? Well done. Now please give yourself a big hand. That's really awesome. No, well, come on, I actually mean it. You told me before you couldn't do it, and most of you could, so please give yourself a big hand for that. That's awesome. Like, in my studies, if I do not invite the memory athletes, but the control group, these are typically students, right? They're the cheapest. Yeah? And they're pretty good in learning. And if I give them a few minutes to memorize a set of random words in order, they hardly have all good. Usually they have 13 to 14. So if you maybe didn't have all 20, but had maybe 16 or 18, that's actually really, really good. Maybe it didn't appear like this, because with this help by me, it was easy. Was there someone who realized, okay, one location I didn't know, but I had most of them, but one location I forgot? I guess must have been. Which location was it? Where was it? It's a sigh. You suddenly know where you forgot something. This is a really huge benefit of this technique. Normally you only have it when you come back home from shopping and find the shopping list on the table. But this is not working for a brain usually. I maybe study a textbook, I don't even know how much of it I remember. Like some of it is there, but how much gone? No idea. So this is a really huge benefit of this technique. I can check each location, do I know what was there? And okay, sigh, I forgot, it was, okay, maybe someone told me no light bulb, but maybe my picture wasn't good, it's feeling and getting warm, didn't work. So you could picture maybe you have a book, trousers with like light bulbs in there, like maybe a Halloween costume with like light bulbs coming out of your leg. You make a new image. You just have to fix this one. And this is really a huge benefit. If you use this technique to present, maybe there's some lecturers here, you prepare a new class, you use this technique for all the things you want to mention. And of course, already after a minute, someone comes with a question you didn't expect, and you have to answer it. And then you want to know, where was I? So at the feet, oh, I answered that one, so I go to the knees. You know exactly where you are. And then if you happen to forget one item, like the upper leg, it doesn't matter, okay? You still have the next one. You don't lose track. These are all really big, huge advantages of this technique. It helped me a big deal being a student. Like, I actually learned to do this. I started practicing this a year before my final exams in school. I was doing okay in school, but certainly not really well. So when I heard there's techniques to improve your memory, and I knew I will have to learn more for my final exams, that was quite appealing. And I improved my, like in Germany, we have like 1 is the best and 6 is the worst, which is a really weird counting system, I decided. So 1 is best. I started at like a grade average of like 2.8 in group 10, like 3 years before my final score, where we had a 1.7. At university, I studied 2 degrees in the time of 1, physics and computer science. And in computer science, besides a single point, I got all possible points in the whole course. So it helped me a huge deal. Maybe you wonder how. Like, how is memorizing 20 stupid words helpful? Okay, 20 stupid words might not be. Maybe my claim that these words were totally random was not fully accurate either. I noticed some people already were thinking ahead and found something in these words. Right over here, I guess. What did you find in there? Bucharest. Bucharest, Moscow, okay. Awesome. Congratulations. You just memorized the 10 biggest cities of Europe in correct order by number of inhabitants. No, I memorized Mos and Ka. So the biggest one will be Moscow. Underneath, who was sitting underneath? The Queen, and here it's not about the sound, but where does the Queen of England live? Which city? London. So Bell stands for Big Ben, biggest bell in the world, so that's London. The next one is around 2 or 3 more hooks. So there was corners. So there was the bulb and the bull. It's not Eindhoven, no, sorry. But I said something about the light bulb. I said, it's on, right. It is on, and there's a bull eating it. It's on, bull. Istanbul. Istanbul will be your number 3. And of course, you can make it way easier. But if you have never heard the word Istanbul before, you can still put it in it's, on, and bull, and still remember it. But if you have any idea about like a famous site in Istanbul or a person you associate with Istanbul, of course you can use that one. Help me, the rest is easier. Petersburg. Kiev. Kiev is good. Paris. And Bucharest. And that's the top 10 you just memorized. Congratulations. Thank you. At least one is impressed. So that's good. So, of course, maybe you say, well, wait, Boris. So I have to remember the list. And then the story, and then which words are important, and then the names of the cities. Well, 10 cities, if I just read this list 20 times, I could have remembered it as well. And granted, I guess that's true. But with this technique, you can just go on. If you don't have just 10 locations, but let's say 50, which is how much I teach people in like the very first day of a workshop, like in a one-day workshop, you will learn 50 locations. You immediately can learn 100 words with this. And if you put more than 2 on a location, it can be even more. Also important, by doing this, you activate so much more parts of your brain, you lay so many more connections that, and I can also show this by brain science, it immediately goes into your long-term memory. So it's not the case that you forget it within a couple of minutes or hours. You will definitely know it for a couple of days. Don't worry, you don't wake up a year from now and checking your buttons for a tattoo. So, if you want to remember it for really long-term, you need to do maybe one step extra. Would that be interesting what you need to do on top? Most people not, yeah. You need to repeat it. Well, first he comes with some memory techniques, and then his fantastic advice is to repeat it. Yes, but. And I guess this but is both important and hopefully positive, optimistic, because if you do it smart, if you do it right, it's way less work than most people, certainly most students think. And what does smart repeating mean for me? It means 2 different things. And by the way, this has nothing to do with memory techniques. It's just a different thing. It means you have to retrieve it from your own memory, not review it. Let me say that again, because this is really important. And we know from studies that most people do not intuitively know it. It's not something obvious. People don't know it, but it's really true. If you retrieve it, if you remember it yourself, if you think, what did I learn? Do I still know the words? You bring it from your own long-term memory to your own working memory, and this process strengthens the memory itself. We still study the neuroscience behind it. We have still competing models what's really happening, but that it's happening is totally clear. If you, let's say, have a textbook and you just read it again, this is not happening, at least way less. So you have to remember it yourself. Part 2 is, how often and when do you need to repeat it? I claim, if you review this list with the 20 words and maybe the cities 5 times, you will know it a whole year from now with no problems at all. 5 times is enough. If you do it in the right moments in time. First repetition, you will still do today. Within, ideally, an hour, but let's say at least at the same day. Why so early? Then I still know it. Well, exactly, otherwise it was too late, because you have to be able to remember it yourself. So same day. Next repetition, it's the next day, still early. Same day, next day. Then after a week, a month, and half a year. Same day, next day, a week, a month, half a year. 5 repetitions, you will know the whole list a year from now. I can't show it to you today. You have to try it out for yourself. But please do, because you will see it works. I admit it depends a little bit of what you're studying. If you say, well, this was really fascinating tonight, I will start to learn a new language tomorrow, well, you will need a few more than 5 repetitions for these first words in a new language. It's too complex, it's not well connected with other information, you need a bit more. The other way around, I don't know who of you already has children, maybe older children. Let's say you have a daughter and she's saying, hey mom, dad, I'm pregnant. She does not have to repeat it 5 times. Once is good enough. So it depends on what you're learning. So this is really important. But again, this has nothing to do with memory techniques, but memory techniques are perfect for this. Because you can just check, do I still know what was at the belly? Bear, line. Yes, I do. Already done. You checked it yourself. And that's perfect with such a technique. But even if you just read from a textbook, most people read it and say, well, I'm done studying for today. Let's go to a party or play Fortnite or whatever students do nowadays. Good, but afterwards, just spend a few minutes thinking, and what did I actually study today? Just these few minutes have such a big effect, it's incredible. If I want to remember these playing cards or numbers, I have to do one more step. Because it's just a talk and not a whole workshop, I don't want to go into all details, but just briefly mention it. If I want to remember the cards, it does not work that I say, well, I put, let's see, it started today with 8 of spades, I put 8 of spades on my feet. And then I have 5 of clubs on my knees. This is not going to work, because the cards itself are not visual enough. So I just give each card one image. If it's numbers, it's the same thing. It's called the major system for numbers. I have a letter-based code. Sorry, I printed it here in German. It's in Dutch online or in my book. And then I just have words like T. After the system is just number 1. Nose would be 20, or a trick 147. So if I want to remember 20, I know my image for 20 is nose, and maybe I smell with my nose how my feet smell today. So I make again an image, but then I remember, okay, I smelled with my nose, so it's nose, so it's 20. It's a number of steps back and forth, yes, but it activates my brain in a way it suddenly has already a system. So the fun thing about memory training is you don't even train your memory that much. You just enable your existing amazing memory for images and locations to store stuff that's normally not going in there. So for each card, I have one image. Yes, there are some systems that makes it really easy to remember these 52 images. So today, it didn't begin with an 8 of spades on my feet, but maybe I kicked a snowman away, because 8 of spades for me is a snowman, and so on. We studied if this really works, also in normal people. So after we studied, you see this on top, the memory of leads and the controls. We had 3 groups who underwent a memory training paradigm, which meant they all had a first session where they were tested, and then afterwards we split them in either, which is called RED here, Loki training, adjusted training with me. So they had a 1-day workshop, or they did a so-called working memory training. I will mention it in a moment. Or they were called, you're on the wait list, you don't get a training for now, but we test you in the exact same moments, and then you can later join the memory training if you still like. So one with me, so basically got a workshop and then had to go home and practice for about 6 weeks, 30 minutes per day. This is some effort, of course, but it's still somewhat manageable. 6 weeks, 30 minutes per day. What they basically did is they go home, we gave them access to an online platform where they just got words, random words, in this case actually random words they had to remember. They already knew their locations from the workshop, and so if they maybe had the word tree at the location table, they pictured something like this in their mind. So working memory training, one is something well studied in the last years. This research sparked all these apps that came up in all the app stores, like Lumosity and Neuronation and Happy Neuron, where you play some games where you sort some images, and this should apparently help your cognition. Turns out it doesn't work, at least not as good as they initially thought. But we used exactly this training from a really famous research paper, and also these people, exactly the same amount of time, practiced for 6 weeks, 30 minutes per day. What I show you now is after 6 weeks, so after 6 weeks they come back, the improvement in a word list learning test. So not how many words they had, but how many words they had more than at the beginning. And you see in red, so that the effect is like massive. They nearly tripled their memory performance in this test. They nearly tripled it. They went from like 20 to 25 at the beginning to above 60 afterwards. And actually we only gave them 70, so maybe they could have even remembered some more if you had given enough, but 70 was the ceiling. You see that the other two groups have some improvement, just because you're a little less nervous when you come back and you know how everything works, but still it's way less. So then we asked them back the next day, and they have to write down exactly the same words again, so 1 day later. Because we wanted to see, is it short-term memory or long-term memory? Because if it's a day later, for a psychologist, that's clearly already long-term memory. And yes, they can still write down all the words. Some people wonder, it looks even higher. This is because we compare like 1 day after with 6 weeks earlier 1 day after. So it actually was a little less. But also it can still happen that maybe in your example you go home and you see, oh, this light bulb is broken. Oh yeah, light bulb. That's what it was. So the next day you suddenly know a word you didn't know right afterwards. And then people were told, well, study is done. Thank you so much for joining in. I hope you liked it. But 4 months later we called again, which was not announced earlier. But as I said, typically in these studies people are students. So when we said, if you come back tomorrow one more time for an hour, you get 10 more euros. They're all back. And we just asked them, try to do it again. And while the other two groups are back to baseline, you can see this, where is it? There it comes. Back to their earlier level, they are not exactly on the same level as after 6 weeks of daily training, which is not surprising, but still more than 100% better than at the beginning. And actually, we do find back that this changes the brain connections towards that of memory athletes. Some newsletter articles said it changes your brain to that of a memory athlete. That's not really the data. It correlates, which means it changes towards the direction, but this measure does not allow us to say how far. But it changes towards the direction we saw within the memory athletes. And these correlations here imply that this actually was relevant. The more you improved in your memory, the more your brain changed into this direction. So this change actually means something. I think this is too specific, but skip this one. So, is it actually useful? And of course, obviously you will guess I believe so. It helped me a big deal, but I want to be open that of course we can discuss about it. We will have some time to discuss when I finish in a minute or two. But I wanted to show you some data, because if you're not studying here, but in Nijmegen, and in specific, if you study medicine in Nijmegen, you have the opportunity to choose a module called Learn How to Learn with me. It's like one of the choice modules. And I like to have a survey before I do anything with them. And I wanted to know, for example, I think it's a little small to read, I'll walk you through it, how much students, like first-year students, know these terms. And like method of loci, only 8% said that they actually knew it. Here it was a group of 75. Memory palace was a little more, but still only like 1 in 8 who even knew it is. There's something like a mind map, which apparently amongst Dutch students is way more popular. It's like a little different technique. And these are some other memory techniques which don't reach higher results either. So it's not something people already know. As I said, it's a Sherlock series, and maybe this book are making it a tiny bit more popular by now, but these are incremental changes. We know from psychology literature that even people who are not like me, like advocating using it, often find in their studies it does help. This is 2 American learning scientists who study this already for 30 years, and in particular they study language learning. They study how this helps to learn new words in a foreign language. My own story, I started using memory techniques a year before my final exams. And up until then, I was really not good at all in languages in school. In English, I always had just enough points to pass, but not 1 point more. And I don't know if it's the same thing in the Netherlands and Germany. Typically, as a second language, you choose either Latin or French. And like every German student knows the following sentence, which doesn't make any sense. Like, if you're good in math, you should do Latin. If you're good in English, you should do French. Yeah, so I chose Latin, of course, and no, I was not good in Latin. I was decent in math, but not in Latin. And then I learned these techniques later. Now I'm really fluent in English. At least no one left, so that's a good sign. I'm also fluent in Dutch. And I speak decent Mandarin Chinese and decent Spanish. If I now mention this to people, they tell me, well, if I just had your talent for languages. Yeah, sure. Could you please talk to my English teacher? It has nothing to do with talent. It's really possible, in particular for words, to apply these techniques. And they studied this, and they showed all the times that it works, and were a little bit disappointed that still no one did it. So they wrote this paper calling it Conquering Mnemonophobia. And in the text they write, like, mnemonophobia is like the fear that memory techniques actually work, because then as your teacher you would actually need to do something. And teachers apparently don't like that if they have to do the work. And so they came up with 3 ways to apply it. So we do know in specific domains that it does actually work. And again, my own research showed if people practiced for 6 weeks a day, 30 minutes per day, 6 weeks daily, 30 minutes per day on average, they more than doubled their memory performance. Yes, of course, such a wordless learning task is ideal for that. Of course, you expect the highest improvement. But also in typical memory tests from psychology, not some we came up with to work best, but just typically what psychologists use to test memory, people on average doubled their performance. Also in remembering names and faces, remembering numbers. Also important, and maybe some people questioned how well it worked for them. Of course, there's a difference in memory over a lifespan. In younger life, you're faster in memorizing than when you're older. But we repeated this with older groups. And yes, they start on a lower level. And if you look at the end, the trained students will be better than trained seniors. But the trained seniors are often better, even way better than non-trained students. So everyone in every age, as long as the brain is healthy, can massively improve their own memory. And we never had a single person where it didn't work at all. Yes, for some it skyrockets, and some just improve 50%, which is still amazing, I think. So we never had a single person where it didn't work at all. So to come to an end of my talk, I wanted to offer, if you want to try out a little more if this works for you, then just give you some resources for that. And if you brought your phone, you could take your phone out now if you like. Because I would like to offer you that if you send me just a text message, it's a German number, but I hope that's fine. It typically doesn't cost anything anymore. Just the word memory, nothing else, just the word memory to this German number. You should automatically immediately get an answer asking for your email address. If you provide it, you get my slide set from today. And then a PDF file with some links for memory training, like the platform we used for our study, the exact platform you can use, and some other links, and some more memory tips for these things I couldn't teach you today. And so you can have that if you like. If it doesn't work, so it should work for Dutch numbers. It typically works for 2 and 3 people. If it doesn't work and you still want to have it, just send me an email. I didn't talk much about memorizing names and faces. It's very similar. You find words that remind you of that. So if you want to remember my name, Boris Nikolai Konrad, you could picture me. There's one Boris, particularly a German one most people still know, Boris Becker. Do you still know Boris Becker? Like, I see here, yes, and I look to the student. So that's pretty common. It's really funny how the age clearly divides people here. Like, so most people still know him as a tennis player. So you could picture me trying to play tennis like Boris Becker, and nothing else. Huh? So I thought about changing it to Boris Johnson, but it's not really getting better for me. So I stick with Boris Becker. So try to see me playing tennis like Boris Becker. Nikolai sounds a bit like Nicholas. So I have the Nicholas hat on my head, trying to play tennis like Boris Becker, and maybe in the hand I have a bag of the Konrad electronics store, if you know that one, from Boris Nikolai Konrad. If you don't know it, maybe with this outfit I go to a concert. It sounds a bit like Konrad. If you Google that name, I'm really easy to be found. So far I'm the only one in the world with this name. So I have a Dutch webpage, and an English and a German one. So you can just send me an email and we'll also send you the same stuff, so that's fine. I can promise you, if you train it, that you will improve your memory. I mentioned that. I cannot promise that you will never forget anything again. No. Obviously not. First, you don't want that, because it's just the way our brain works, and it's good that we forget. I don't want to bring this wrongly. Forgetting is good, normally, for a human. And of course, it happens to me. I want to tell you this little anecdote, but I'll leave this up. A couple of years ago, a radio journalist asked me about this. It was actually pretty nice because it was right after I set the Guinness World Record for memorizing names and faces. And that one actually went a bit through the media, even in Germany and surrounding countries. So that was awesome. And amongst others, I got a phone call from a radio station in Berlin. And this woman said, Boris, we heard about your world record. That's amazing. Congratulations. We would love to interview you about it. Oh, of course, I said, that's awesome. It will be live. Oh, that's even better. It will be live next week, Tuesday, in the morning show at 6:30 a.m. Okay, that's early, but of course, for a live interview, I gladly accepted. And this morning, I had set the alarm on my phone. It rang at 6 o'clock. I woke up, so everything was fine, until I thought, 6 o'clock, my first class is at 10. At 6:30, it rang again. I saw the alarm broken, and it's actually someone calling. I don't know, must have been my answer. On the other end, I just heard, good morning, Boris, this is Radio Berlin. I'm a little bit late, sorry for that. The host will be live on air with you in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, Boris. Tell us, when was the last time that you forgot anything? Yeah. That must have been ages ago. So yeah, that happens to me. Of course, I don't do research by myself, so I'm really happy to say thank you to a lot of people, and it should be way more. I just pointed out to the most important ones. That's it. Thank you. Yes.
Boris, thank you very much for your awesome talk. It was really nice listening to you and trying the things ourselves. That was a spectacular experience, actually. That
awesome. Happy to hear that.
Yeah, and I think this evening I can still remember all the things. But, and I'll try tomorrow and next week.
What time should I call?
6:30. It's okay. Okay. Are there any questions? I have quite a lot of questions. There are people in the Netherlands who can memorize complete phone books without your techniques?
I don't know any in the Netherlands. I know there's a very small number of people who have often quite severe disabilities, often on the autistic spectrum, but sometimes other brain diseases, which come with sometimes a superior memory for meaningless facts. And calendar, because often these people also have a perfect memory for the calendar. So if you give them any date, like 16th of March 1984, they know which date of a week it was. This is studied a bit. There's just a few dozen people worldwide who are known. And it seems to be like this, that the brain is specializing. It's not getting the input it should, which leads to all the social disabilities and the dysfunctioning. Typically, they're not functioning in daily life. But the brain is just focusing on one thing. So it just seems to be over-exercising one specific part. This calendar thing is actually really weird because we still don't know why it just happens by itself in these people. But it's actually super easy. I can teach it to anyone in 15 minutes. So it sounds amazing, and they love to put it on TV documentations. But it's actually, you can learn it in 15 minutes maybe was for fast people, but certainly within an hour you can learn to do this because it's just a pretty simple math trick. We don't know why these people know it because no one ever showed them. But it's not as amazing as it looks like because it's not memory, it's just calculation.
But I have another question.
Sure. Is it useful? I believe it is. I can show you some studies that support the opinion. And of course it's true. For studying a deck of cards, I will be maybe 50 times, 100 times better than someone else. For being a student, I was not 100 times better. But if I now can learn Chinese like 4 times faster than anyone else, it's still a pretty amazing achievement. If I now studied computer science and physics to degrees where people typically don't believe memorization is really important in the time of 1 with like nearly perfect scores, I'm really convinced it was really useful for me. I see it that volunteers who took part in my study, which I just invited for being part of the study, like months, years later sent me an email thanking me that they was allowed to be part of that because it really helped them for now finishing their degrees. So I truly believe it's really useful. Of course, the difference for playing cards is way bigger than for learning a language. Yeah, but if you just are twice as fast in learning a language, it would save so much time in schools and companies. So I believe it's useful.
Boris, this pops up one of my questions. What's the relation between memory and IQ? Could you say that you were a good student, but then you start memorizing, doing all the competitions, and you got a way better student? You could do 2 studies at a time of 1.
Right.
How did it affect your IQ? Has it been measured or?
Like for me, I don't really have the pre-measurement, so I don't know if it changed my IQ.
No.
I showed you that we find in the memory athletes that they have a pretty high IQ.
Yes.
What we do see in our volunteers is that IQ correlates with initial memory. Like you can still have a high IQ and a poor memory, but typically the higher the IQ, the better the memory on average.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at memory improvement, it doesn't matter. All the people improve the same amount.
Mm-hmm.
But if the one with the high IQ also did the training, he will still be the best.
Mm-hmm.
That's why in the memory athletes, where we only took those who actually win the competitions, we found high IQs because they started from a high level and then trained. So IQ correlates with memory, but it's not needed at all for improving your memory. And if this memory training improves your IQ, well, that's a little less clear, and I don't want to raise promises I can't keep. We have some. In our study, we had this effect, but it was a small effect size. So in all statistical terms, we did find an effect. It was significant, but small. So, yeah.
Okay. And could you say something about when you're studying, for instance, medicine or law, you need to learn a lot of things by memory. Then your techniques are very useful. But when you're studying math or physics, it's more like understanding things than learning things.
Right.
Could you say something about that?
I think the miscomprehension people tend to have here, even teachers, is that understanding works by itself. But understanding needs material to be understood, to work on. Like we think nowadays I don't need a good memory anymore, everything is in Google anyway. But to have an idea, you have to have the connections that can come up with the idea. If like Newton came up with gravity because an apple hit him on the head, it was only possible because he had all the connections already laid up, because he read everything about physics that was known to today, so he could then suddenly have an idea about it. So when I studied higher math as a first-year student, like I just memorized the whole proof for the Fourier analysis, which didn't mean I understand it. And this actually might be a poor example because I'm not sure I understood it till today. But it at least helped me first to then think about it more without having my textbook at hand. It helped me in the exam to like just reproduce some lines of that where people already typically took 10 minutes even to remember it, and I could just write it down in 30 seconds. So for the same task, which was about some application, I had 10 more minutes compared to the people who needed 10 minutes to even remember what it was about. So I would claim, yes, it enables later understanding, but that's not automatic. If you just memorize it and don't think about it, you don't understand it. But if you want to understand it and have nothing in your head about it, that won't work either.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
There was a question up there quite early on. I think we should take this one.
Between really memory.
The question was about the difference, like having a good memory, but still maybe not being able to recall it in the right moment. And that's of course true. The thing with the pictures I did with you was a perfect example for that. So you couldn't tell me all the 20 pictures, but with seeing them you could recognize them. And this memory techniques actually help with both. And that's awesome because they build what we call in science a retrieval structure, which means you now know where to look. Like, if I want to remember the cities, it's not like, I should know it. Like, and if I see the list, there it is. But now, okay, I have to look at the body. So you have a retrieval structure, a mechanism to go back to find the actual information. So this is indeed true. You have more encoded here than you can recall or remember, but these techniques help you with both, because they help you with faster encoding, which you call meaningful encoding, and giving you a retrieval structure on top. You know where to look for it.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Does your technique work out different for males than for females? And did you study that?
Is your technique gender neutral, so to say?
In the memory competitions, by now, it was a few years where it looked different, but by now the world championships are pretty equal in number of males and females. In particular in Asia, there's absolutely no difference, and people seem to use exactly the same techniques. In my research, there's some reasons why we don't include female people. Like they have this hormonal cycle and this messes up our brain imaging. So we don't like that. So we typically in the studies only have males, so I can't tell you that from my study data. From my experience training groups, giving workshops with really different people, like as I said, nowadays I'm half my time in science and half my time giving workshops. Of course I have as many women as men, if not more, and I teach them exactly the same methods that it works. So I don't see any reason why that should differ.
And I would like to know if there's a difference in age. If you are young, maybe when you are young, then it's very easy to understand what you are saying. But when you are about 60 plus or something, is there a big difference between the youngest and the older ones?
There's some difference by the speed of learning and using it, but not by being able to. So in memory competitions, there's also senior division, where you need to be 60 plus to be allowed to compete. And they still have scores every student would find absolutely astonishing. So this definitely works. I remember, which was of course a bit exceptional, that I was once booked by, I think it was actually, is it a Dutch company, I don't want to say anything wrong, by a cruise ship company who's also operating in the Netherlands, and typically they have an older audience, and so I had to give 7 times 1 hour over the course of a week. I think the youngest one in the group was roughly 70, and then it went way higher, and I went a bit slower than I typically do, but it still worked really well. And what's even more interesting, like if you use this technique for memorizing names and faces, take my example. You can see me trying to play tennis like Boris Becker, because you know who that is, while someone who's 20 doesn't. You already know way more names. And sometimes I have older people say, my memory got so bad, it was so much better when I was younger. So I say, well, let's see of how many people you know the name, and your 20-year-old grandson knows the name. So actually you know 10 times more, so your memory is way better. They don't see it like this, because that's not what they experience. But if I say the measure how much is in there, the aged memory is way better than the younger one. If I measure how fast people can encode, yes, you're better with 20 than with 80.
But still, there's a lot of hope.
Definitely.
Okay.
About memory, for me, there's a big difference. Memory in words and memory in history or geography.
To say
Yes,
something about
it of course differs a bit what strengths we have as memory, and it often aligns with what we already know about. If I know a lot about history, and I now read a history book about a topic that's new to me, it's still a way of thinking I'm familiar with. So I will much easier remember stuff that's in there than maybe an engineer who now for the first time ever got forced into class a history book and tries to read it. So of course if it aligns with what's already in there, it's much easier to remember. And that's why words are difficult, because they often do not align to something. So my technique is to artificially, it's often called artificial memory, artificially links a word to an image, to an historic event if you know it, to a place, like what we did is words to places, and suddenly you use the systems you have, and suddenly you're really good in remembering words, like from one moment to the other, because suddenly you have a way to link the words to something that's there.
I'm a little bit puzzled. You showed as long as you do your exercises and do it very thoroughly, you will be able to increase your scores. So what's then in the basis, what makes all these elite different from normal people? Suppose the control group is the group who did exercise in the most way they could achieve the optimum. What's then the difference between them and the elite?
There is none. The memory elite just went on longer in doing the training. So the question was with the elites and then the trained ones. Our memory training is 6 weeks. And of course, the memory elites, they didn't stop after 6 weeks. They kept going. So they have more experience. As I showed you, we don't find any difference in the brain. We don't find any difference in psychological profile. We don't find any difference in sleep structure. Basically, they're just normal people. They just kept on doing this training. So that's why I say, if the people I gave this 6-week training, if they keep on going, like within a couple of months, they can probably reach a level of the memory elites. Everyone can reach that level to compete in a competition. Yes. I don't know, here in the Netherlands, she's a bit famous. There is a TV presentator called Antoinette Herzenberg. For this TV program, Doctors van Morgen. I gave her like one afternoon coaching. And 2 months later, she took part in a memory competition herself, also for this TV show, and memorized the whole deck of cards in 5 minutes. And she's also not 16, but like, I think 54. She was able to do that. And I'm pretty sure if she would have kept going, she could have done it in 2 minutes, another month or two later. So yes, I believe, honestly, out of my full heart, what I achieved, everyone can achieve with the same amount of practice.
The elites will disagree, I guess.
Sorry?
The elites will disagree, you think? Yeah?
No. Yeah, I mainly was part of that. I won the World Championships with my team 8 times, and I'm pretty sure that's true. I only achieved it because I learned the techniques and I practiced them, and I practiced them for more than just half an hour a day and for more than 6 weeks. But I started 15 years ago, so I have like you have to catch up a bit. Huh? But like the guy who won the World Championships this year, not just Alex Mannen, but it's another medical student, so apparently they are also very gifted for that. It's an Italian student, he's 20, and he started to do it about my age for the same reason, preparing for his final school exams like 2.5 years ago. And then he really practiced more than half an hour a day for like 2 years, and now he's the best in the world, and actually is the best we ever had. He broke the record for the total score. And of course, not everyone doing this amount of training will achieve that, but everyone would achieve the level that they could compete at the World Championships. So yes, at the end, maybe IQ, maybe some talent plays a role to break the world record. But to memorize a deck of cards in a minute, like no matter how old you are, I'm 100% positive everyone in this room can learn to memorize a whole deck of playing cards in a minute in just a couple of weeks, if you would like to.
Wow, cool. That's nice. Boris, I had one more question.
Sure.
It's about emotions and memory. Things which are very shocking to you, you always remember very good. And you just gave the example of your daughter who is pregnant. That's an emotional thing.
That's shocking.
That might be shocking, but you remember those things very well. Is that also used in memorizing things when you couple something to emotions?
Basically, yes. So, of course, when I describe the images, I try to make them not just visual, but also a little weird.
Yeah.
I call them merkwürdig in Dutch and merkwürdig in German, which like, literally means words to be remembered. So, it's already in there. And, therefore, yes, when I try to come up with these images, I try to make it personal. If I now give an example, I try that it works for everyone. But again, if you're called Peter, you maybe wouldn't think of Peter Pan at your bottom if you have to remember Peter at the bottom. So you can make it more personal and more shocking if you like. So it's up to you.
Yeah. And then when you look at an MRI, a brain makes more connections in that way.
Yes. So that's what we find. We have some difference in brain activation, but the strongest difference we have interconnections. So the way different brain regions connect. This means while you learn, you activate more parts of your brain, and this changes the way your brain connects internally. And this helps you to remember.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
May I ask another question?
Yeah, I first go here and then I come to you. Go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, do you still use shopping lists, or do you just always remember it?
So shopping lists I don't use out of principle, because I remember really early on I read an article by someone who back then, when I was not there yet, was on top in memory sports, and then got this question and said that he does. And I found it so stupid that I decided I will never do that again. And 99% confident I really have always what I need. Like at my home, my wife will just don't shout, Alexa, we need more milk, but we'll say, Boris, we need more milk. And I typically bring it, so that's the next time, so that works.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was wondering, when you are learning a language, you, for instance, you have your German words and you translate them into French, but then if you are in France, you have to retrieve them and translate them back sometimes from French to German. How does that work in your technique?
My technique is that I will find a so-called keyword, like a word reminding me of the to-be-learned new word. So I typically tend to be better in first understanding, let's say in my case, a French text, than producing a French text. But I think that's fine, because if I quite early on understand more than most other people would, that's already good. And then by repetition, because I already have it in there, I'll be much faster also to achieve the other direction. So it's true, it's not both directions equally. But still, since both words are linked in one image, I still have at least an indication about what it is. Like I didn't learn French, but let's say Spanish. If I had iglesia, that means church, then for iglesia my image would be an igloo. So I picture an igloo, which in the igloo village is a church. Now if I think iglesia, I know, yeah, that's a church. But if I now think church in Spanish, I at least know, okay, it begins with eagles, with something, and then chances are I might find it or not, but at least I increase the chance. And then if I see it, I immediately know what it is. And then because I remember, like 3-4 times later, I'll know it both directions. There's a question right up there on the top. If I'm able to nest items on each other, have a multi-layer system, yes, I am, but it's of course a little more advanced. So I would start with having a basic list and putting images on there. But when I applied it for physics, for computer science, and concepts came back in a later class, I would do this, yes.
Boris, could you, I come to you in a moment, say something about bodily experiences regarding to memory? I've heard that pianists, for instance, they say, well, the memory of the music is in my fingers. And I once was in, I don't know where it was, but I was wanting to make a phone call home in a telephone cell a long time ago. And the keypad was upside down. So I wanted to dial the number of my parents, and I couldn't dial it because I got confused. So I wrote down in a normal keypad, oh yeah, this is the way I call them, and then I wrote the number down, and then it was so silly. So it was not really inside my head, the number, but more in my fingers.
Right. So, like, I don't want to destroy my own talk, but of course we don't even have just one memory. We have different memories.
Yes.
And so very first level, the distinct memories are in implicit and explicit memories. So memories we know and can describe, or memory we have but maybe don't even know about. And there a big part is procedural memory. And this is as movements, like being able to ride a bike, but also typing a phone number, always the same mechanism. This actually relies on a different system in your brain. But this is really just by repetition. But some numbers people dial very often when people still dial numbers.
Yeah.
We need maybe to explain to the younger people that we had to dial numbers. It's just by repetition goes into procedural memory, which is like really different to your number memory. But it's really hard to apply this on purpose to memorize numbers this way, because procedural memory needs a lot of repetition, so that's not really a mnemonic strategy. But this, of course, is observation you had, probably many people share.
Yeah. Okay. No. Yeah, go ahead. You remember things by images, but do you change those images to remember things better?
So what I do really early on, like in the example I gave to you earlier, is if I just learned it and then realize it didn't stick, I'll try to make up a better image for that. Of course, sometimes I will have it that I memorized something and the information changes. Like many years ago, out of geography, I wanted to study some of that, apply the techniques to see how it works. I memorized all the capital cities in the world. And it turns out not even more, sometimes capital cities changing, even like countries are changing. So I need to kind of update this information. And here it does not work to override it. This would be conflicting. So I just kind of, it's maybe addressing your question, add it on top. Like I make another link. I immediately know, okay, this is an old information, this is a new one. But if I try to override it, this would be more interfering. And since it has a location, it's typically not confusing, because every image has one specific location. So it's always using both location plus image. And then it can be many, many images, because I have so many locations. And everyone has them. Like if I tell people for the World Memory Championships, I need like maybe 2,000 or 3,000 different locations, people think like, I couldn't even remember these. And it's just not true. Everyone has them in their head. You just never labeled them. But you have your house where you live. You have the city where you often go for, you have vacation places, you have your supermarket, you have all these places, you just never labeled them. And so I just labeled them to put information there, put images there, and then it's really distinct, and then I can just add something on top to update the information.
Compression, memory compression?
Yeah, I would say what I very briefly showed you about like the number system. This is kind of a compression system. Like I have very similar numbers, and then I reduce them to a few words. We also have in memory competitions a discipline binary numbers, where we have to remember zeros and ones, just random zeros and ones. And if I'm really good, in half an hour I can do 3,000. And then like 30 random zeros and ones for me actually get one single location, because I can compress it so much, because I first like calculate from binary to decimal numbers and then into images and then on the location. And then 30 zeros and ones get actually one single location.
Okay, here we have a practical question. Go ahead.
Yes, I have two practical possibilities for your message. One is playing bridge with my wife or somebody else. Will it help me to remember what cards are already out of the game, and will I improve my practice? That's question one. And the second, I have grandchildren, and they are in 3 gymnasium, and they're doing well when I buy the books, and I give them to them, and it's almost St. Nicholas,
Right.
But would that be helpful?
Did everyone hear that? I think the most important thing he said, like you can buy the book for your grandchildren, is almost St. Nicholas. So this was the important part.
Will that be helpful? Yeah. Will this help them finish their school?
So let me answer.
With positive results, What are the positive results?
Sure. Let me start with the first question, playing bridge. I never played bridge, so I don't have the experience. I know I had occasionally people come to my workshops because they like to play bridge a lot and wanted to use it for that. The thing with bridge and other games is, of course, it goes pretty fast and you have many rounds after each other. So it's pretty repetitive. So you need to have this trained to quite a level to be pretty fast. So, but then yes, it works. Because there's a number of ideas you can apply, like, yes, I have an image for every single card, but you can have, for example, 2 or 3 images per card. That's what many people do. And then you can do something with the images if the card was played. And then I can show you if a card was played or not. Actually, what I did for Holland's Got Talent was I gave the judges a deck of cards to shuffle it and gave me half of the cards back. And then they needed to sort their half of the cards. And I looked through my cards for like 20 seconds, and I told them exactly which cards and which order they had. It's exactly the system which would be helpful for playing bridge. But doing this like many times after each other needs quite some training. So yes, it's possible, but it's already a bit advanced task. For your grandchildren, if they read the book, so if you gift it to them, that's the first step. They also need to read it and then apply the method. And then, yes, I'm 100% sure. I could help many students already, and I'm proud of that. And as I said, I have students of any level who later tell me they made good use of it. Of course, I had people in my courses who maybe tried it out and then didn't apply it. So it's really, you need to apply it. Same for me, even after so many years. My memory is not just by itself working extremely well. I need to apply it. But I can do it like this. And the age you described, that's pretty good. So if it's kids younger than 8 or 9 years old, I say it's too early. But from 9, 10 years old and up to wherever you go, that's, in my opinion, that's again my opinion, really useful and really helpful and can definitely help you study faster and achieve better grades. It did for me, it did for many people I could show it to. And yeah, so I am optimistic on that.
We go to the final question. Go ahead.
Well, actually, I had 2 questions.
Sure. So, now choose one. Huh?
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was wondering if you're blind, then do you have other things that you can replace the images with, maybe with smell? And my second question was, because you had something about emotions and that you then remember stuff, are there also ways that you can, maybe some tricks that you can on purposely forget then things?
The first question was about blind people. Interestingly, there is a school for blind children in Hanover in Germany who use these techniques. And of course, it's hard to tell someone who was born blind, like, picture this there. But if you tell them, like, imagine or have the idea that the queen is sitting on your knees, or that your leg is getting really warm because there's a light bulb in your pocket and then the bull eats it, they can still come up with a concept of that in their mind. Actually, it turns out, if you ask someone like this to go to an MRI, it's actually their visual cortex. Because typically the information is not coming in from the eye, but the visual cortex is still there and still relevant for making concepts, making up scenes in your mind. And it's of course hard to say they see something because they don't have any experience of seeing, but it's the same part of their brain that could still come up with the idea of the queen on the knees. And therefore it actually works. And then the second part,
forgetting. It's about forgetting.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Can you forget
about emotion, forgetting something on purpose?
Yeah.
That's really hard because if you do something with it, you just strengthen it. Therefore, for example, in psychotherapy, if people have a very bad experience they would like to forget, the psychotherapist would never try to really make them forget it, but to unlink it from the emotions. It's just like they ask you to come to them and actually ask you to remember it. And you might get really stressed out, but then they calm you down and say, see, you're really safe here. Here's some nice water. You're sitting in a comfortable chair. There's no predator or whatever the bad experience is. And by doing that a few times, you unlink it from the emotional trauma, but you can't forget it. Because there's the indication if you try to forget it, you just suppress it, and then just something scary could bring it all back and really like have a much worse effect. So, so far, that's not possible. There's some research targeting on the microbiology level, individual engrams, like in mouse models, they have some success. But that's really, really invasive, so I don't see this happening anytime soon.
Okay. Wow, this is a very exciting topic. I have the feeling we could go on for hours. I still have a lot of questions myself. For instance, about sleep, how important is sleep for your memory? But the answer is inside this book. I read this afternoon.
There's a chapter on sleep and memory.
I can very warmly recommend you this book. And what I especially liked about your lecture is that you made clear that our brain has a huge potential. Every one of us, and that's not even so special to memorizing, but you just have to make the good connections and make images combined to abstract things like names or numbers or things like that. And that was really an eye-opener for me. Okay. I hope for you as well. Tomorrow morning, or this evening, we remember Moscow, and then the Queen and the bell and the other things. And we will repeat it. Then we have to repeat it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then
in a week,
a month, and then we will, after a year, we will still know it.
Awesome.
Boris, thank you very much. It was an awesome lecture.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.